Okay. Okay. Hello, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I see some familiar names, so why don't you go ahead and write in the chat where you are joining us from and whether there is any question that you would like to ask Diego, what you would like to learn today. Diego is here to answer all the possible questions about large language models. We're going to start in a moment, just giving people time to log in. So please sit tight. Okay. Hola from Barcelona. Hi, Lucia. Good to see you.
Hi.
Okay. And Ceci from Argentina. Hi, Ceci. Yeah, always eager to learn more from Diego, of course. We all are. And Victoria. Hi, Victoria. Good to see you again. Okay. I would say let's get started slowly but surely. And Javier, hi, also from Barcelona. That's great. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's GALA webinar. My name is Isabella Massardo. I'm content strategist here at GALA, and I'm very happy that I get to welcome back Diego Bartolome, founder and CEO of Synthetic AI. Probably know him already. His new company, Synthetic AI, focuses on generative AI solutions. But before that, in 2006, he founded Taoyu Language Technology, which provided machine translation solutions for LSPs, and it was later acquired by Transperfect. And in between, Diego has had leadership positions, among others, at Transperfect as director of AI and Microsoft as senior program manager. And today is going to talk about a topic that everybody wants to learn about, large language models and their impact in the translation industry. So, Diego, I'm going to shut up and I leave the floor to you.
Thanks, Isabella. Thanks for inviting me and having me. And thanks, everyone, for attending. This is a hot topic. I feel that, nobody's an expert. We're all learning what we're doing, and we will keep on learning because these technologies are evolving so fast that it's sometimes very hard and overwhelming to follow everything that's going on. But before we dive deeper into large language models, I would like to start going back 5 years, more or less, in time. In 2016, 17, 18, Microsoft, Google, all the tech giants were claiming, and there was a lot of hype about machine translation achieving human parity. That was the moment when transformers and these generative pre-trained models were starting, and that made machine translation evolve completely from statistical machine translation to neural machine translation. I remember a presentation we did at Taoyu with Promsit that we were comparing well-trained statistical models with the first generation of neural machine translation, and the results were not there yet, but the evolution of the tech was impressive in the coming years, and now every machine translation company is basically using neural machine translation and this type of deep neural networks. So, but at the time was very similar. So a lot of hype, a lot of noise, a lot of people making claims, and then it took quite a while until everyone went into it and changed their processes, their tools, and even the technology. So it's always good to go back. At that time, it was the claims were by some organizations where, okay, maybe human translation will disappear, maybe translators will be out of the job, or translation companies. But the fact is that the market size has grown significantly. It's still growing. It's growing every year. even in crisis, even when there is no money for anything else, companies still need to sell, they still need to go global, and still machine translation and translation are really, really important. Here on the left, you see, I think it's by Common Set Advisory statistics on how many languages are needed to reach a percentage of the world GDP or the population. And as you see, the number of languages needed to achieve those goals is always increasing. So that means that the market, the translation market, will always increase because the countries, the different relationships of power relationships change, and the companies always go global. And also at the same time, machine translation market is also increasing, well, quite fast and exponentially. So this is also to show that even if some claims said something else, the fact that is that instead of saying bye to human translation, the market has grown, and the industry is full of opportunities, and we do more than what we did 5 or 6 years ago. What is true as well is that these technologies have evolved significantly, and I saw that across, well, in Transperfect and TaoYu, and then after that as well, that the amount of effort that it takes to post-edit and to correct the translation is decreasing. The number of edits are decreasing. Probably average edit distance across the top 25 languages is below 10% these days, so only minor changes are needed. And this is a slide I took from Translated by Marco Trombetti that is measuring the time to edit. He says that 1 second per word is what it takes a person to review a translation. And the numbers here, or the figure, shows the time to edit when it's machine translation. In 2015, it was over 3 seconds. And last year, it was already at around 2 seconds. And in theory, we'll reach singularity, so human parity somewhere around here, but who knows what happens, because it can flatten, it can go faster, depending on the tech. But what is true is that things have improved. So once you have a technology that is working and that technology is being used, and it happens here, you enable many more applications, but also technology evolves over time and improves. But that doesn't mean that there is no work, there is more work. So I like these analogies because in the end, they are very similar to what's happening today. So machine translation has improved, and it will improve. So the same happens with large language models, and what we are seeing, even if ChatGPT and other large language models are impressive still today, already today, they will improve. They will enable us to do more, and probably they will change many of the things that they will, change us in the way we do things. And this change also implies opportunity. So it's very, very important to not to go crazy and say, okay, now we do this, now we do that, and then you can get crazy about these things, but rather think, and I will go with some analogies now, and take those opportunities to really grow your business. And also, it's very, very important, the lesson I took there as well, that it's very important not to believe everything you read or listen to, or because every company is different, every use case is different, and you really need to test, play with these technologies, and learn on your own. And I think that's the best way to see what these type of technologies can do for you. So going now deeper into generative AI, and I'll be happy to take questions after that, but now let's forget the analogy and let's go over this. And as you see, since December, the interest has grown significantly, and it's growing exponentially. That means that everyone is looking, and it's very clear because I guess in every country, ChatGPT, OpenAI is in the news every day, for good things, for bad things, but it's there. And what is good from a company developing generative AI solutions like Synthetic, it's also very good for us in terms of marketing, because sometimes it helps us explain what we are doing, and it also helps us explain what we are doing different. So, but the interest is really, really growing over time. and this is a little bit crazy as a slide, but this is the large language models landscape. Sometimes when we are thinking these days about large language models, in general, people are thinking about on OpenAI, ChatGPT, GPT-4 only, right? And those are not the only technologies that you can use today. You have many, you have tens, you have hundreds. And depending on the task, the goal that you have, your resources, how you want to deploy things, your privacy requirements, your confidentiality requirements, you might use one or another, or you might use a combination, or even you might use all of them. To name a few, I think Cohere, for instance, is a good competitor to OpenAI. There is also this European company called Aleph Alpha. There are a few Chinese initiatives as well. And there are tons of open source models at Hugging Face. And even the last model that is at least on Twitter, on LinkedIn, for researchers in the field and companies, this Llama by Meta that was released and can be now trained and fine-tuned and even adapted to you with very small efforts and very little cost, and you can even run them locally without having the GPUs available for you. So there are a lot of models, there are a lot of alternatives, and what I've always tried throughout my career is not trying to apply what's coolest, what seems to be the best because they have more marketing power, but rather try to decide what's your goal, what you are trying to achieve, and then go backwards. Maybe you're using OpenAI to build a classifier because it's easy and you do it with them, but maybe you could deploy something on-premise very easy and much more adapted to your case, and that works better. So it really depends what you want to do, how you can achieve. There are many alternatives. You will need to balance quality versus cost and implementation and resources. So there are a lot of things that can be done, really, and this will continue to evolve, as we will see later. I like this as well. This was released, I think, last week by Forbes and Sequoia. This is and Meritech, I think, and then this shows a little bit the landscape of the different companies that are working in the space. You have here the full stack large language models. You see OpenAI, you see Cohere, you see Anthropic, Inflection. And those are really the very large language models that are available to anyone to use, basically with APIs. There is also a subset of companies that you can use as well if you want to train your own systems and you need data labeling and annotation. You have Snorkel, Scale, Search, Coactive, and many others. For instance, in Barcelona, we have one called M47. And then you have open source models like Hugging Face, they stand for Alpaca, that then became also Llama. And then you have all the variations of that. There is an Italian one, there is a German one, and everyone is training their own Llama models now. And then what I find really more interesting, there are main two things. One is the creative applications beyond text, for instance, character AI, which is multimodal, and Midjourney as well for images mostly. And then also where I think that really the value is in for B2B and for companies is where we are going, which is industry verticals, trying to focus on a problem that was not correctly solved before or with previous solutions. And then you deploy or you develop a solution that will address that problem using the new technology, together with the old technology, because sometimes the old technologies are still valid. And here you see also for the enterprise, one very interesting one, I think, maybe you might know about Jasper for content creation. They raised over 100 million with over $1 billion valuation. And there is this other company, Writer, which is developing their own large language model for their specific marketing content. And in a sense, when you customize a model, and even if it's a smaller, because you have some learnings that you can achieve, maybe you achieve much better quality than with the big, large language models that are publicly available for everyone. And there also the privacy and confidentiality will be much better. So this is just a snapshot, because here we have even more. You will have the slides later, but this picture is changing basically every week. New companies arise. There are freelance developers that develop new solutions that you can use on your own computer or as a software as a service every week, literally, I would say every day. And the number of apps is really growing exponentially. There are a lot of very good quality and valuable open source models that are available. And in that sense, today it's very easy to get started and do fast prototyping and testing. If you have some technical resources in your companies, they can develop something really fast. I mean, in a matter of hours, you can have something working for your particular scenario. What is harder than take that prototype, then take that little application, take whatever vendor or provider you want to work with, and then put it in production, combining and making sure everything is aligned, people, process, and technology, or even business models. No, because in the end, if you deploy some of these solutions for your use cases, maybe you also need to change the marketing. Maybe you also need to change the business models, how you price your services. Maybe you can diversify and offer more services, and that takes time and effort. It's not something that you can do from day one to the next day. And also, and we were talking about this with Isabella before. ChatGPT and OpenAI was blocked in Italy. Spain is considering that, or countries in Europe as well, I think Germany. And that is a fact that is happening. So you need to take all these things into consideration as well. Probably there are alternatives. And we need to be very conscious of what we do with this. I think that the training data they have used, it's the data that is available on the internet. So Google, Microsoft, all the search engines are using it for search. They are using it as a derivative work to generate content. But it's also very important. It has to be regulated. I'm a strong believer it has to be regulated. I do not believe it should be blocked or it should be stop the development, but I think it should be regulated for sure, and making sure we have the right security in place. But also, it also depends on us. So OpenAI, for instance, they have an opt-out mechanism now that if you use them, you can opt out from the data program, so your data won't be used for anything. And all the big vendors, for instance, in machine translation, didn't have that at the beginning, but they have that today. All of them, you can opt out from data retention policies, but the same will happen with these large language models as well. So in the end, in this world, what we see, and probably we all agree here, that we are, if not at the peak, I hope it's a peak, because it's crazy already. We are at the peak of inflated expectations in the Gartner hype cycle for emerging technology. However, what I think differs from other technologies is that this innovation trigger towards the peak, it has happened really fast. So ChatGPT was released, and in a few days it was already in the news everywhere in the world. They reach 100 million users extremely fast, in a matter of days. So we are probably there, and this figure and this roller coasters, let's say, it always happens. So when you have too high expectations about a technology, then you get through a phase where you're not achieving the results you want. I remember many years ago when I was studying operations management. Typically, when you implement an ERP, and probably you all know that in your companies, you implement a new software solution to make you more efficient. Even today, sometimes there is a drop in productivity because implementing things, it's not that easy. But then after a while, you see a big improvement in the productivity. Here, it's more or less the same. So we will see that we need to adapt many things, our way of working, we need to make sure there is a productivity gain, there is a cost efficiency, that our prices are aligned, as I was saying before, that the marketing is also aligned with everything we do, and then we'll reach a plateau of productivity. What I think here, as well as in the same way that going up was really fast and it was very short in time, this will also happen very fast. The thing is that we cannot predict how fast it will be. What we can control on our side is being able to go through that journey faster than the others. And this is what will make us more productive and more profitable down the line. So it's just a matter of starting, I would say. Okay, going beyond like the market overview or the situation overview, I think there are many applications that are a low barrier of entry, and maybe most of you have tested them. So content generation for text is one. For instance, at Synthetic, we started with that. We started with creating content for websites, for e-commerce, for other situations, but it was, I would say, quite easy. We built very fast an interface, which of course it's not final and it's quite, let's say, not optimized yet, but it allowed us to get into the content creation, projects very fast. What I've seen as well, and the experience, my experience there is somewhat limited as everyone's, but for instance, we had a project a couple of weeks ago where we were actually competing with the company using OpenAI themselves, and we got 1,000 products that we needed to prove that it was working and it was better, and the company was happier with our results than what they could achieve with their own people. And that shows that what I will talk about later, the prompt engineering, the few-shot learning, the fine-tuning of the models plays a role, and it's important, and that's also very important to learn. There are prompt marketplaces. There are places that help you with the way you should ask this model about things, and it's a good source of learning. In this translation industry, of course, another area or another very low barrier of entry is machine translation. In a Taos panel yesterday, everyone was quite convinced that these large language models will become better than current machine translation models in a couple of years. So everyone will be using them. Why is that? Because of the evolution. And of course, if you are able to fine-tune them for the translation task, because remember that these large language models are intended for a variety of tasks. So if you try to do everything, in the end, you are not the best at something. But if you fine-tune those models for your specific machine translation task, they will become much better, and they will be much better. And if they are smaller, it will be very clear that you can use them for that. But also, you can use them for other things related to machine translation, the pre and post editing, the last bullet point here, because you can also correct mistakes in the source quite easily, or even change the tone of the machine translation output, or even use them for quality estimation. There is a paper by Microsoft, Christian Federman and Tom Cogney, I think, that they say that this they propose a metric to evaluate machine translation quality using these large language models. So things that before were quite hard and not that easy to do, now you can do it. You can do them, and those are things that you can play. You can go and log into OpenAI's playground and play around with these solutions. Then at some point, if they work for you, if you think they are valuable, you can do two things: either go with a vendor that will be their expertise, if that is not your core competency, or you can develop those teams in-house so that they can do more with this type of technologies. And finally, another one that I wanted to touch on is synthetic data, because that is a huge market, and I know many translation companies are selling not synthetic data, but data annotation, labeling, and so on. in this case, with these models and using a combination of them, the way text is labeled can change and be modified. For instance, that company I mentioned before, M47, is starting to work with on annotation with multiple large language models and being able to generate synthetic data so that the models evolve and improve over time. And that synthetic data is also very relevant, for instance, for machine translation. If you have I remember in machine translation that we didn't have enough data sometimes, no, with the statistical technologies, and then, or with even neural technologies, and then you can use these large language models to produce similar sentences to what you have in a translation memory, and therefore you can increase the size of your data and also increase diversity. That is something that many people are also testing, and I've seen companies doing that. This is very low barrier. This only requires you to either connect to the API and get the right tools to query them in the right way, or use the playground in OpenAI's or ChatGPT and start playing with it, or with any of the other models here. I mentioned prompt engineering. I think that this is very important today to try to achieve the most out of this. I'm not sure if it will be the way we are querying these large language models in the future. And this is because, for instance, I read today that there are systems that are learning themselves how to prompt. So you basically request something, whatever that is, and even if your first prompt is suboptimal, then it will modify that prompt until you achieve your end result. So therefore, I'm not sure if that is something I would invest a lot of time, or I would pay money to learn with a course. I would rather play on my own, because also I don't know if that will stay over time. But don't forget that only because also future learning is really, really relevant. Essentially, future learning means that you are using in the prompt itself, you are giving a few examples that are relevant to your problem, the generation or the completion or the task that you're trying to solve, and that adapts the weights of the large language models and gets you a better result. So that's something very, very important that many people are not doing, but I think it's really relevant to achieve good results. And finally, fine-tuning. Fine-tuning might be expensive sometimes, and maybe it doesn't make sense in most cases. But if prompt engineering and future learning doesn't work, then think about fine-tuning or think about creating your own model. So in the end, and I think I mentioned that already, but in any new technology or when you want to change, you need to take into account people, process, and technology. Technology is what we have talked about mostly, but processes, how things are done, are very relevant, and AI can help there, and large language models as well. And people, how this impacts people is also very, very important. We need to make sure that they are more productive and they are able to do more with less. And this is what will make your companies more competitive in the future. But with this type of technologies, data will be at the core. Data for any company is the greatest asset these days. And when AI is widespread everywhere, I think it's very important for companies to really take care of the data, store it properly, not only with security and with compliance with the laws, but also making sure that you are able to extract its value. And when you do that, that's where you will find a lot of opportunities. This is from 6 days ago, actually. So Sam Altman is the founder of OpenAI, or the CEO, and he said that size won't matter as much moving forward. Essentially, there seemed to be a battle of number of parameters in these large language models. You might have heard about 7 billion, 100 billion, 500 billion, whatever, trillions. And that seemed to be a battle. Okay, let's build the largest, the most complete large language model. And I think that with this Llama and this type of models we have seen with what it's called reinforcement learning with human feedback, we are starting to see that the size won't be the most important metric, and maybe it's much better to have smaller models that are specifically adapted to our use cases with good data and with that continuous learning so that we can achieve the most. So OpenAI, for instance, maybe they are focusing on that, and also they are working on making sure that privacy and security, confidentiality, all of that is properly handled. But we'll see what happens. And this is from 2 days ago from Andersen, a VC firm in Silicon Valley. This it's a pretty good blog post. I think I posted it on my LinkedIn. But the first wave of generative AI was this: you get a prompt and you extract something, and that's the output you use, and then you work with it. Whereas they say that wave 2 would be the reverse. So with a lot of information, get that and put it into insights. And somebody sent that to me, and they sent it because this is a little bit the journey that we have done at Synthetic in just 5 months, which is we started creating content and being able to make sure we generate what the companies wanted. Whereas now we are focusing more on this, actually, on the synthesis. We are developing systems in which, for instance, you can query your own documents. You have a search engine for your own documents, but instead of only looking at the references or outputting the references, what it does is that it gives you the response to your query. So it's a matter of, it's a system that helps you be more productive by extracting the right information and the right answer only with your private, secure and confidential data, and not using OpenAI or any other third-party service. Of course, there are a lot of challenges we need to solve in the journey, and for now we have the first systems only. But this is very, very exciting, and to me, this is very, very important in B2B scenarios mostly. But of course, the generative AI still will be extremely important for the B2C scenarios. But I recommend that you read this this blog post. It's really, really interesting. And going a little bit farther in time for the translation industry, I think that the main question here as well is what will happen with translation. So will it stay or will it change? And to me, I think probably I like to divide in 2 cases main, but of course there are many, many more. In highly regulated industries, whereas high-risk translation, and you really need to make sure that the translation is well, a representation of the source, and really the information contained is the same in the same way, and the same with no terminology errors, with the correct style, tone, and so on. In that translation market, I think that will always be there. Maybe what will change is the way we generate the content in the source language, or we will modify the output so that we can control, for instance, some tone of voice. And maybe if we are doing medical documentation, it could be even personalized depending on the age range of the patients, for instance. And these type of things might change, but still translation needs to be highly related to the source, and well, it needs to be the same as the source. Whereas in other areas like e-commerce, travel and hospitality, or e-learning, maybe things change more. One of the things we are doing with content creation is e-commerce product listings. Product listings are essentially, well, a picture, a product name, and some features, some characteristics of the product. And then companies used to translate that across languages. However, if we have these large language models that work fine in let's say 20 to 30 languages today, but it will probably be better for long tail languages as well in the future, maybe with only the specification, we can generate the product listing. Or maybe with only the image and the product name, we can generate the product listing. That's a different way of doing things, and that might have an impact on how we carry out globalization, if you want. It might not be translation anymore, it would be transcreation, using large language models at the core, and then using just monolingual people to correct that content. In travel and hospitality is the same, for hotel information, for well, any property information, for city information or places. It's essentially the same. So maybe we just need a better in-language review and specifying the right inputs to those large language models. And also another opportunity that is quite interesting as well, I think, and this is combining not only text, but also if you want video or even images, is e-learning. E-learning, it used to happen more or less the same, but with this text to video, text to image technologies, and even the generation of presentations automatically, the whole experience of e-learning will change completely. I know very well a company I invested here in Barcelona, that they are developing e-learning, not e-learning, the learning solutions for students, high school students and university students, that they are doing this type of things so that it's adapted to every person, every student, and that's the same can be done today in B2B scenarios. So those are exciting new opportunities or new way of doing things. Of course, if your business is one of those, probably you want to do things slowly, but you want to start. And if you're a translation company or you are working in these fields, maybe you can also think about different ways of offering these services to your customers. But finally, I think there are also other important aspects to consider that I've mentioned. Data privacy is one, or confidentiality, making sure you select the right vendor, making sure your security measures are in place, making sure that no data is leaked or could be used. That's very, very, very important. No? There was this piece of news that Samsung employees have leaked confidential information to OpenAI. And of course, that might have or might not have consequences, but you really need to think about it. There was a discussion on LinkedIn, thanks to a post by Konstantin Drach, that people are using it anyway, but it's very important how you deploy all these things. And I remember many years ago that some companies used to block the largest machine translation engines, and they were looking for on-premise solutions or managed solutions that didn't store any data, and that will remain important also here. And also as mid-sized companies as well, and also the largest companies, it's how you integrate these technologies, it's also key. So either you do it because you think it's really important for your competitive advantage, or you would outsource it to a specialized company that knows and has applied this to many verticals, or even to your own vertical across a variety of companies. And also one thing I always like to touch, which is the social impact. This has an impact on us. Of course, everyone, probably we are excited and scared at the same time. And it's always tricky what will happen with us, how we will work in the future, and the uncertainty of the society increases a lot. And that's it's very important that doesn't lead us to anxiety, because then it will be bad for everyone. And then the other very relevant thing is that, for instance, if you think about ChatGPT, this ChatGPT Pro, that was $20 a month for the US or for many countries in Europe, that seems like a good price that you can pay for these things if they make you more productive. But if you think about other countries in the world with a lower purchasing power, that takes them out from the market. And I think it's very important that since these technologies can be extremely strategic, they should be regulated, and we should be aiming at having everyone be able to use it, so that we don't increase even more the differences in the world. And those are things I think that as an industry we need to be able to consider. And that's all from my side. So I guess I'm now open to questions from the audience. I don't know, Isabella, you said I have all the answers. No, I don't have all the answers, so I might try to have the answers.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for such a thoughtful presentation. It's good to have someone giving us some words of wisdom in this hype of large language models. And there are a couple of questions, but also I want to invite people, if you have any questions, please raise your hand if you prefer to talk directly with Diego. I can open your microphone, but I see some questions, so let's take them. So first of all, Dimitra is asking, can you mention some skills employees that handle large language data are expected to have? And how should people with linguistic or business background upskill or reskill in order to cover the needs in such teams or organizations?
Yeah, so I think that what NLP engineer, natural language processing engineer, data scientist, data engineer, those are the type of profiles that are more used to work in this type of scenarios. So those are the people that have the skills to take this forward. On the other hand, with the publicly available APIs, pure full stack developers, if you want, can connect to them and create an interface or a service that for internal use or for as a product. So those are the profiles that are more relevant. As a business owner or linguistics, I think some of the things I mentioned during the presentation, I think it's very important to try that yourself and check what you can do. And then today online, you can learn so many things, or you can even ask ChatGPT to explain you things, or the other models. So I think it's very important to just just try, just start playing with the tech, checking with what's publicly available. All the big companies have these playground modes that you can use, so it's very, very easy to use, and you can start playing with it. And based on that, you will realize, okay, this I can do, or I can help lead, or I need some support, or I will need this type of profile because it's too complex.
Yeah. And then there are two questions about confidentiality. So one was, do the same privacy concerns apply when using OpenAI APIs? And that's from an anonymous. And then Anna is asking, how do you address the confidentiality issue? There are not many open source models that can be used for commercial purposes.
Yeah, so there are a few things there. For instance, in OpenAI, you can opt out from their data retention. So, and they tell you that they won't use this data for anything. If you want to be more secure, I would go with using OpenAI's models through Microsoft. Microsoft has no trace policy, so they won't use your data at all. And that's probably the safest. And also you can decide the data center you want to use. They have data centers anywhere in the world, basically. So those are for OpenAI. For the other companies, you need to look at the terms and conditions. And of course, the smaller the company, the easier it is to negotiate. And then regarding the confidentiality and the large language models, I mean, for the very large language models, probably the best quality is achieved when with OpenAI's and Anthropic, Coherent, these large companies. But also there is this trend of a smaller models trained for specific tasks, and those Llama-based, for instance, they can be installed in your laptop, so they require very, very little resources. So in that case, you're pretty sure, well, you are completely sure your data is not going out anywhere.
Okay, thank you. Julio is asking, are there any ethical considerations that need to be taken into account when using large language models for translation, such as bias or data privacy concerns? I think you kind of replied already a bit, but
yeah, for the bias, it's an interesting topic as well, and that's a thing that I encourage you to test. I've seen quite a few examples of OpenAI delivering, let's say, a gender-neutral translation for some of the most classical examples, and I think it's important for you to try. And also, the good thing is that you can specify in the translation that the person, for instance, is a man or a woman, for instance, in the prompt, and you can even define the tone, or you can even say this text it's intended for a 10-year-old or for a 50-year-old. I mean, that could be bias, seen as bias to an extent, but it could be addressing really your reader need. And I think that opens up a very interesting point, which with trained machine translation engines, it was a little bit harder to solve. Now you can really specify what you want. That before it was much harder.
Okay. Let's see, there's a question from Ade. Have you already seen end clients starting to make use of ChatGPT for their localization projects? And what would the use cases normally be?
Yeah, I think there was a post by Slater a few hours ago, that a company has started to use ChatGPT for translation. I've seen a lot of companies play with the technology. I haven't seen a lot of companies use it in production at a massive scale yet, but that's normal. No, it's been what 5 months. If you want to change your process, if you want to change the technology, it takes time. You need to evaluate it across all aspects. You need to evaluate cost, confidentiality, quality, and that takes time. I would say that in general, the results will be significantly better for high resource languages, English, French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, the usual suspects. For longer tail languages or low resource languages, it will be harder. Although what I've seen as well is that with GPT-4, that has improved significantly as well. Some languages that were useless or close to useless before, and now they produce pretty good results. So I think it's a matter of trying, but I haven't seen a lot of companies in production yet, but because of that, most probably.
Okay, thank you. And there are a few other questions. I think some you have already replied in your presentation, but just as a reminder for everybody. So what is the size of resources requested to train your own model?
That's the hardest among all these things, no? So in the end, you need to have an expert in this type of technologies. I think that training a large language model requires quite a lot of resources and very specific knowledge that is very hard to acquire, and there are not that many people that can do it, although there are many more people every day. But still, it's scarce. What is becoming easier is this fine-tuning of these smaller models. That I would say that a good natural language processing engineer or data scientist should be able to do it.
Okay. And you mentioned machine translation. So the question here is, does quality estimation in such applications also take source text into account, or do they reckon a measure of the quality expected given the source, or do they still use a reference sample?
No, so when I was talking about quality estimation, of course, if with references is another thing. I was speaking without reference. So with this type of technologies, you can estimate the quality without any reference based on the semantic similarity of the source and the machine translation. Basically, this is what the models are doing. But I haven't tested myself, but even I think that someone I saw that they was asking how confident are you on a scale from 0 to 100 for this translation, and it gave a confidence score. The challenge with those things is that they can be accurate or not, because this type of large language models, they might be making up things. So the score that you get there is not that relevant. But if you want to measure quality for a translation or a machine translation, I would also use, as I was mentioning, this type of multilingual sentence embeddings or paragraph embeddings, so that it gets you similarity in terms of the meaning.
Okay, and there is one more question. We have time. You talked about pre-editing. What about using applications like DeepL Write or ChatGPT itself to improve the source text?
Yeah, that's a good option as well, for sure.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. Let's just wait a couple of seconds. But thank you, Diego. That was really interesting and wise, I would say.
Thank you.
In the meantime, let me remind everyone that when I close the session, there's going to be a form on the screen. You can give us your feedback and let us know what you think of Diego's presentation, but also suggest any topics for a future webinar. The next two webinars in May will be on May 4th, a webinar on price strategies, and on May 18th, we're going to talk about machine translation evaluation quality at Electronic Arts. And then, of course, on May 9th, we have the GALA Academy on International SEO starting. So for the time being, thank you so much, Diego. It was good to have you back at GALA. And we hope to see you again presenting. And thank you, everybody who attended and asked questions. And you'll receive a follow-up email with the link to the recording either today or tomorrow at the latest. And for now, have a very nice day or evening, depending on where you are. And we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Isabella. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Diego. Bye.
Bye.